One second. Sure. Yes.
Hello, everyone. Greetings to the next inspiring session at the Digital Innovation Pavilion at the UN Climate Conference COP29. My name is Miroslav Polza. I'm with IAI Blockchain, and my guest today is Lukas Seringer, the CEO of Planet2050, and we are going to talk about Planet2050 addressing untapped F-gases and SF6 climate issues with digital MRV. So we've had just a session about trends and updates in digital carbon finance and the markets, how and regulation, how developments are going on, and you are covering a big part of this innovation agenda and bringing new solutions to this climate governance community here. Welcome to the Digital Innovation Pavilion. And also mentioning that you are a member of the Climate Change Coalition, the oldest and one of the bigger coalitions, multi-stakeholder platforms for looking how to use blockchain for climate action empowerment. We are very happy to have you here, and I would like to ask you to present what you are doing and then to highlight what is the differentiation, the new element that digital innovation and emerging technologies are bringing to these tasks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the great hosting of the Digital Innovation Pavilion. It's been really great to be here at COP29, and especially to take the opportunity to mention about some maybe more niche areas, where I believe digital MRV and digital monitoring can really help detect issues that are great climate issues, but relatively untapped at the moment. And so this is an initiative we started actually a couple of months ago, focusing on SF6. We talk a lot about carbon and CO2 and greenhouse gases, but a bit less about some of the very potent and dangerous gases in the world, especially, we're referring to, I think that looks dangerous. Like a bomb, exactly. So I think it's really important to also address in the spectrum of greenhouse gases and ozone depleting substances to address, what are some of the issues that we can look at when we try to, act for the climate and for the quality of the air and the atmosphere in general. So just a couple of words on F-gases. This is from our world in data. It's estimated that from all global emissions, obviously we have CO2 related emissions, we have methane, but there are many other gases. There's nitrous oxide, and there's the F-gas, the fluoride gas, which is 2.1% of global emissions. So you may think, yes, it's a small number, but unlike CO2, there's no cycle of F-gas. There's no cycle of SF6. Once it's in the atmosphere, it may stay for 100 years. SF6, for example, stays for 3,200 years. So we're not planting trees and capturing SF6 back in the air. So I think one of the missions we have globally is how do we prevent more of these gas going in the atmosphere, similar to methane as well. Nowadays, people talk a lot about removal. I think, yes, we need it. We need it down the road for abating residual emissions if we want to go net zero. But let's try to avoid more gas going in the atmosphere. And so one of the issues is that if you look at this graph, so these are a number of F-gases which are expected to grow by 2050 because a lot of them are used in refrigerant, cooling, electronics, magnesium industry, electrical grids. And the reality is just that with the global growth, democratic growth, economic growth, growth of electrical grids as well, we're putting more of these gases in the systems. And eventually it's going to result in more leakages and more release in the atmosphere. So, I think people are quite familiar with ozone depleting substances. There was in the 80s the Montreal Protocol, which was big success. I think there was some report recently that the ozone layer is recovered because there was such an alliance of countries at the Montreal Protocol to fight ozone depleting substances. And so we've seen people moving away from CFCs to HCFCs, so away from ozone depleting substances. Still, greenhouse gases are dangerous for the climate. So we solve the issue of ozone, and we've had the Kyoto Protocol, then we've had the Paris Agreement with an obligation on inventory reporting every year on a number of gases, including SF6 and HFCs, PFCs. So the gas that we have basically replaced, and that we're still using, and we're increasingly using in our systems. There's been also the Kigali Protocol signed in 2016, which is the new baby after the Montreal Protocol from the global climate community to basically reduce by 2030 80% of HFCs and PFCs. So there's a great mobilization, and also in other types of gas like methane. There is a global methane pledge. And so what I want to talk about today is something I'm sure we'll hear about more in the future, is the SF6. And so if you look at SF6, CO2 is 1, methane 27. You have some of the F-gas between 3,000 and 14,000. SF6 is actually the most potent greenhouse gas. So 1 ton of SF6 in the air is 25,000 times CO2. And again, it's basically staying 3,200 years. So yeah, that's where we are at in terms of climate issues.
Wow, just it's really an important topic. Obvious. One question regarding the grids. How are the SF6 gases used there? Just out of curiosity, it's a small issue, but it triggered my curiosity.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, once you establish that there's an issue of SF6, you need to understand where is it coming from and where is the leakage and the emission coming from as well. So, one of the great things is that nowadays there's increased mobilization for SF6. I'll come back to this one. We're talking about emission sources. 89% is in transmission in electrical grid. So SF6 is a very dense gas. It's odorless, colorless. You don't see it. You cannot detect it with LiDAR and radar. But it has very good chemical properties. You can do transmission of electricity in the SF6, in gas chamber, in pipelines, in electrical switchgear, we call this, especially for high voltage. Also used from low and mid-size mid voltage, but in very lower quantities. The biggest equipment, and we'll see it here, this is what we call the high voltage switchgear. And so the property of the SF6 is very good because you don't destroy the gas when you have electricity transmission in the gas chamber. Now imagine if you have to replace your gas every 2 or 3 days, that would be a nightmare. This one, in theory, you don't need, and it keeps always very good insulation properties. So it's been used for many decades. Maybe 99% of electrical grids in the world have these switch gears. So you have air insulation substations. Basically, the electricity transmission is in the air. But there are many areas where it's interesting to have it in a condensed space because of safety reasons or lack of space. And maybe you can even put it in the building, and then you will have SF6 switchgear. So there are other sectors like magnesium, aluminum, semiconductors. In the 90s, the Nike shoes, with the bubble, the Air Max, used to have SF6 in the Nike. And there was actually back then in 2006 carbon credit projects from Nike to avoid and replace SF6 from the manufacturing process. So there's a long history with the Kyoto Protocol and the CBM of SF6. A lot of learnings of also what went well and not in terms of over-crediting and the way SF6 projects were derived. We believe now today we're in a new phase where we're addressing what's happening in these systems. So basically here, after 15 or 20 years, you start to have leakages that are happening. You may also have mishandling by staff. And then what happens at the end of life, decommissioning. Is the SF6 properly recovered and permanently destroyed? So there's a lot of issues happening here as well. So usually what happens with switchgear systems is that you have a certain percentage of leakage that may happen, which at some point gets critical for the operation of the switchgear. And what grids typically do in this case, they just top up. They add more SF6 in the switchgear. And you may have a situation that every week you're adding a few kilograms of SF6. And we've seen projects where there were leakages of 0.5 tons or up to 2 tons per year. 2 tons per year, again, it's 50,000 tons CO2 that goes in the atmosphere and stays. So on SF6 emission, the semiconductor and metal industry are also sensitive to SF6. But really where we're looking at issues is in the power grid, and there's a great expectation that SF6 will continue to increase. In the EU and in California, there has been now F-gas regulation where SF6 needs to be gradually phased out. It means by 2030 and 35, there will be no more SF6 in the grids. But in many other places in the world, in China, in India, in the Middle East, in Africa, it's not the case. And especially we have sometimes grid infrastructure that is very bad, with switchgear that are expected to have 50 years, 60 years or more lifetime. So, if nothing is done and there's no regulation for SF6, how are we going to monitor and prevent it from damaging the environment? This is a study by German companies that says that basically today we have, from the SF6 bank currently installed, we have about 5 gigatons of CO2 equivalent in the bank. Obviously, it's a potential for emission, but with the future gigawatts of renewable and grid expansion, we are basically adding more of potential emissions. Yeah, so maybe just going to mitigation. What can we do about this? We can train the staff to better handle SF6. We can identify leakage and seal or reduce the leakage or perform conventional repair. And then we can retrofit the installations. This is something that happens a lot in typical F-gas project with refrigerant or cooling, where you take the devices and you replace them by devices that have lower risks or different gas that are maybe based on air or CO2, O2 mixture that can reduce from 100 to maybe 1 or 2% your greenhouse potential. And the last one is there are now technologies that are based on SF6-free, completely SF6-free gas and technologies, which in the case of greenfield, so new project, could potentially be relevant.
Okay, I understand now the challenge, and as this is a topic also with the company, so you're not the public sector person who has identified a challenge for the common good, but you are looking at a solution that can be marketed. And so how did you come to this topic, and where is the economic potential, and where is the demand side for your services? Perhaps first defining what is really this digital measurement and body verification that you are offering, and also how it differs from state of the art. What's really the next level that you are offering? On your homepage, I've seen you are building the digital infrastructure for the next generation of carbon markets. So what is so new about what you are doing, and who is paying for it?
Great. Yeah, so in general at Planet2050, we have multiple verticals and project types. So SF6 is one of the initiatives we're leading, where we believe that digital innovation and infrastructure can help accelerate mobilization and mitigation. for such issues. So basically, our maybe back to the first question is how do we get there? Because indeed it's such a niche area, so we need to think about SF6. Um, the last year we actually got contacted by some partners and companies that we knew that were active in switchgear manufacturing and switchgear operations. So industrial companies that know what they talk about. They've been working with. No, you don't need to convince them. Especially they are the ones also starting to address SF6 in general. So they saw that we're building expertise in the carbon market, and they wondered if reducing or avoiding SF6 could be eligible for carbon market, because there are many places where you don't have the financial stimulus. If a grid or an industrial operator has a switchgear, but they're not regulated to control and limit the emissions, who's going to do it? Right? And so there are many cases where there's no incentive in absence of regulation. And so this is how we started to look at the issue and understand that the start of the problem is that there's no monitoring and understanding of SF6 leakages and emissions. So our theory is, if we continue business as usual, as you saw, everybody talks about electrification. So what nobody thinks that electrification comes also at a cost for the environment, because grids have SF6 and other related emissions. So basically, business as usual. We have more SF6. We have aging existing infrastructure, so emission will shoot up. We have regulation that can help to curb it down. And then we're believing there can be other incentives and additional financial stimulus for people to act. Right? There has been actually several methodologies from the Clean Development Mechanism, the CDM, that specifically looked at SF6 in electrical grids. Most projects have actually been done on production or testing sites of SF6, which actually came with a perverse effect of overinflating, the leakage and the issues. So opening the pipe in order to justify more reduction. So I think this is what we've seen in the first iteration of implementation of these projects. And so we're really believing that with very strong, high quality, high integrity monitoring, detection of leakage, and then mitigation, how to address these issues, we can make things different and bring more trust and transparency to these issues. And so the partner we work with, one of those is Master Grid. It's a French company, used to be part of Siemens, carved out, has more than 100 years of experience in high voltage infrastructure and switchgears. Basically came up with this unique technology to detect SF6 and create a sealing device that will go over the flange tip. So what you're seeing here is typically the interface that is usually leaking. It can be on valves, on doors, handles, or on the flange interface. And again, typical business as usual case, it leaks, you add more SF6, maybe after 2 or 3 years you do a conventional repair, which means you need to completely cut the installation. It can mean blackouts for people in the grid that need electricity, or it needs additional cost because you need to install a temporary transmission station in order to do your maintenance. So in many cases where it really doesn't work in the business as usual, and the leakage continue to happen without any monitoring. And so more than 200 projects have been done with identified leakages from 10 kilo to 2 tons of SF6 per year. And we believe that this type of technology and solution can be promoted more, and maybe can come with financial subsidies so that the cost is not prohibitive for grids to implement it. Test, pilot it, and then realize that it can be a great solution. Even if you plan a conventional repair to replace the equipment that is leaking, usually it may take 2 to 3 years before that intervention can be done. With this, you can come in a matter of 2 or 3 months to have this installed. You can remove it at any time. So it can also come in a combination of conventional repair or retrofitting of equipment. Yeah, and so one thing that's interesting is that usually there's a density matter. inside the switchgear. So the curve that I showed before. The leakage, but it's nothing like real-time monitoring or density monitoring. Because usually it just alerts you as an alarm where the density is going under a certain level, and if it goes too low, then it would just shut down the system basically. But so usually when it goes down, you add more SF6 and then you're good, right? So you know more or less how much you have topped up in the switchgear. The idea here with the project we have is also to work with sensor and IoT companies that actually replace the analog sensors to digital enabled sensors. So you have the data feed available that you can direct to a server, get that data feed and understand in real time what is the density inside the switchgear. So the approach we have is first measure and detect. So we detect the leakage and we know when to do an intervention. Provide the leakage sealing solution. Monitor to ensure the permanence, because once you have done that intervention, you want to make sure there is no new leakage happening, otherwise it's not permanent, right? So with the sensor in place, we can guarantee that for 5 or 10 years, that leakage has been addressed and the SF6 is not going again in the atmosphere somewhere else in the gas chamber. And then, when you think about it, if you equip more grids and more switch gears with this type of solution, then you can start to do more predictive maintenance because you have all the parameters where sensors are installed. So you can start to understand what are the conditions that would make a new leakage point happen. And maybe do early intervention, early maintenance, where you basically learn more from the condition of the infrastructure. Yeah, so the way it looks is basically sensors are installed in the switchgear equipment. So you have multiple gas chambers, which all need to be equipped with the sensors. The data is sent through LoRaWAN or other communication signals to a secure server, which usually is not controlled by the grid itself. So we're also avoiding perverse effect from the grid. And then this data is available on the Impact platform to our industrial partner, that is, project developer that can then issue through the CDM methodology a carbon credit project that will come to subsidize a part of the cost of the intervention. So yeah, identification of leak, sealing intervention, registration of the project, which usually comes as a bundle of multiple switchgear in a regional area. Then continuous gas density monitoring, and the avoidance credit can be issued with the real-time data feed from the sensor to make sure that it has been permanent and there's a real quantity that has been avoided. And so we think that this type of solution can greatly help grids, so not only to address leakage, but actually also to understand and monitor, where is my SF6, where is it leaking, because that's really the big issue that we see at the moment. And as regulation is coming more and more and compliance is coming in that space, we also definitely know that more and more grid will have to come to these solutions, whether it's from the carbon market or not. So if we can help, create that incentives and momentum for grids to act, I think that can be really good.
Thank you very much for presenting this solution, a practical use case of how digital innovation can improve climate interventions and the reduction of greenhouse gases, SF6 gases. And the question is, with this digital innovation enables higher quality credits. And do you see that on the demand side, there's a certain flexibility that buyers of credits would pay more for a higher quality credit?
Yeah, I mean, we're one of the slides I showed quickly earlier is also to show that companies like Airbnb, they started to put F-Gas in their portfolio because there's a lot of reports showing that actually it has the potential for impact, real potential, high quality. When the CCP of the ICBCM, when the first CCP label got attributed to methodology, it went to methane avoidance from landfill, if I'm correct, and also F-gas recovery. because they recognize that these have a potential to be the highest integrity methodologies. And again, you're addressing a real issue in the world of AI and data and tech and electrification, EVs. People need to realize there's an impact on the grid. For a company, grid emission is a scope 2, or possibly that's something we're exploring as well. But addressing issues related to electrical grids, such as SF6, could also potentially be part of the scope 2, because it's related to fugitive emission of the grid for the electricity you consume. So if you're Microsoft and Google and you have great carbon neutrality or net zero plan, but the reality is that your emissions are shooting up, like it's the case since 1 or 2 years because of AI, then we believe we should look at SF6 credits. So we're engaging with those. I think it's something that will take time because as also there needs to be a lot of education. A lot of people are not aware about SF6. It's a topic that a lot of grids are also, not yet obligated to report and talk about. Many countries have the NDC, the SF6 in the NDC inventory, but many countries don't yet because they don't know. They don't know where it is. And sometimes grid, yeah, they don't have to talk about it. Yeah? But I think as we progress, we see a lot more initiatives, regulation coming in. I think there's a global awareness, and this is also why we wanted to talk about this today. And so, yeah, we believe that buyers, we're specifically interested to think about buyers that are connected, that may be the cause of this consequence. They're the one that should act upon it.
And as you are addressing the real public interest issue, it's how is your company's structure? Is it a purely private company or is it a public-private partnership? Do you have grants to develop things?
No, it's a purely private company. We believe that private finance and private capital has a role to play in climate finance. We have instruments such as the voluntary carbon market, now the Article 6. We've been actually talking with some governments about, because, grid expansion and development finance has had a lot of roles, especially for renewables and grid infrastructure. So governments like Germany, Switzerland, Japan are actually funding a lot of infrastructure for grids. So they are increasingly looking at SF6 as well. Some of them have told us that they look specifically for Article 6 project of SF6. So we are exploring and already discussing with a few governments about, again, the challenge is SF6 part of the NDCs? Because if you don't have SF6 in your inventory, because you have not done the exercise yet of reporting and collecting information, then there is no line on your registry to do a need more, in Article 6.2. So there are a lot of countries that have SF6, that understand it's an issue. GCOM in Saudi, they have clearly SF6 emission reduction as part of eligible activities. Click Foundation in Switzerland is interested to look at the topic. So this is the type of activities we're doing, engaging with public institutions that are involved in SF6, that are maybe financing grids or looking for Article 6, but then also private players, because sometimes we're discussing with aluminium production sites in France that have a switch gear, and they want to make sure they address these emissions, because for them, it's actually a fugitive emission on their side, so it can even be a scope 1. That's the way we work on this. Maybe just to mention, sealing is an interesting topic for leakages. Well, I think the big game changer would be once we have available gas that can completely replace the SF6. Because then imagine the potential, the numbers I showed before, the 5 gigatons. This is something where you can avoid the related emissions by retrofilling. So you take the SF6 gas out, you permanently destroy it. So you don't risk emission leakage anymore, and you replace it by something that is maybe 99% lower, less harmful. Yeah. And so I think this would be the great potential. I just want to mention, so beyond leakage, we also have, how do we finance new technology? Same with sustainable aviation fuel. How do we finance that when it costs more than traditional fossil? Same with CDR. Now we start to have SF6 free technologies, so new switchgear or new switchboards which come with no SF6, but they also cost between 2 and 5 times more. So there is an interest to actually look at climate finance from development finance or from carbon market or Article 6 to support that development. And actually, the German government, the BMWK, launched SF6 initiative exactly for this. So it's not only us talking about this. The GIZ is currently working on the preparation of an international initiative, which we believe could be a bit similar to the Global Methane Pledge, addressing SF6 globally, having a coalition of nations and grids that are tackling this issue, and also understanding how we can finance this, equipment that is traditionally costing more, but that will avoid a lot of SF6 to come in the grid. And so Monday, at the Yeta Pavilion Business Hub, there will actually be a talk from GIZ and related members about this initiative. And yeah, looking forward to engaging more participants, those that follow us online, about the topic of SF6 and how we can address it together. Thank you for having me here.
Bravo, thank you very much. Wishing you a lot of success in implementing this solution, and thanks once again also for your great contribution to the ecosystem development of blockchain solution providers for the common good, Positive Blockchain, BC100 Plus, Climate Change Coalition. I believe that there is huge potential for blockchain and emerging technologies in general, and convergence of emerging technologies to build a better world, build a better future. And thanks for your service, and thanks also to Alexei, our co-host of the Digital Innovation Pavilion, who is also pioneering in many fields.
Yeah, thank you so much. Maybe just on that note, we definitely believe that in such a system, decentralized ledgers like blockchain can help to provide more trust. For example, on having the data feed from the sensor directly on chain, because obviously you can have sensor, but you can always tamper proof or manipulate data from sensor to control it or calibrate it wrongly. And so the idea is also to explore how we can create a better digital infrastructure using blockchain to directly natively get, with a wallet in the sensor, get the data feed registered on chain and be auditable at any time by someone. But yeah, thank you again, and let's look for productive next days at the COP29 with you and all the partners and Alexei. Thank you.